Hello troops, Spectre N7 here. As promised, we're going to do today a takedown and investigation of the internals of the Nexus Pro versus the Dart Zone Pro. And ideally by the end of this video I want to be able to tell you which of them you should buy and why you should buy them. Let's start with the things they have in common. They both have a quick change spring option. They have a M4 AR-15 style buffer tube, and the spring comes into the buffer tube. Now, they both have a quick change option. On the Dart Zone Pro, you have two screws, one here and one here, and then once you've undone those, you have a locking lug point in here, and you can see that they latch on there, and again you just twist that with the screwdriver and pop the whole thing out. On the Nexus Pro, just undo this screw and then twist the end cap, and it's got lug points in it. In both cases you don't actually need to leave these screws in place. You can just go with the lug nuts, with the lugs themselves. You don't need the screws there, so changing springs on these can be extremely quick and extremely easy. The buffer tube on the Dart Zone Pro is that little bit longer, as you can see, but in terms of spring positioning inside the buffer tube, they're practically identical. You can see that the screw ports here and here line up, and here line up, and the line for the back of the plunger tube pretty much lines up. So whilst this has a little bit of a dead space in the back of this plunger tube, which I'm surprised we've not actually done anything with to get a longer spring in there, but that's what we're looking at from the externals. But now it's time to crack these bad boys open. Okay, so this is what the inside of a Dart Zone Pro looks like. It's very familiar to those of us in the hobby, retaliator style platform. I've taken the spring out of this so that I can manipulate it appropriately. Going from front to back, we have a, for want of a better word, worker or retaliator style interlocking breech. Now this is so that the front portion of the barrel can come in and mate with the front. Now the standard barrel that you get with the Dart Zone Pro looks like this. It is a relatively accurate tolerance metal barrel. It's a little bit short for the plunger tube that you get with the blaster. I have replaced mine with a Monkey Mods barrel of the same inner diameter, which is slightly longer, but it is a very serviceable metal barrel. Very happy with that in general. Now, one of the things that we've seen a lot of people in the community do is replace this. It is a drop-in replacement for the worker prophecy piece. The issue with that is you do then lose a lot of the benefits of the takedown aspect of this, which is one of the reasons why I really like this particular blaster, the ability to take it apart and easily transport it. But this is perfectly serviceable. The way that it mates up, if I was being super critical, I'd prefer to see an O-ring here rather than this plastic rim, but it does lock together quite firmly. there's been a lot of messing around with this in the community when this blaster first came out. By replacing this, you can gain another 10 FPS out of the blaster, but it requires a lot of fettling with Teflon tape and O-rings, and to my personal opinion, not worth the extra effort. Here in the trigger grouping space, we have obviously a spring to return the trigger. We have the safety, which is basically a push button safety, locks that in place. This is your catch and your magazine release. Again, relatively straightforward. Up here, we have a spring-loaded dart guide. One of the biggest issues that I have whenever I take this apart is I forget to put this back in. So now I kind of keep it in this kind of spacing. Now when the breech opens up, boing, I'll leave that in. You can see that we have a O-ring here to seal the breech, to kind of get the breech shut. It goes all the way back. It is a plastic bolt sled, retaliator style, with threaded brass inserts here to mean that you're not screwing directly into the plastic. Now this then moves the breech all the way back and locks it forward. Now again, you can see when I move this, you get that shift in the plunger tube. This is to the plunger tube is actually on rails, and I would strongly recommend that you lubricate heavily on a regular basis those rail systems, because it works a lot better with a good gunk of lube, as is pretty much any moving part in any Nerf blaster. So many people don't actually lube the inside of their spring as often as they should, and well, that leads to all kinds of issues. Yeah, so decent sized plunger tube. You can split this entire thing apart. This whole frame does come apart. The plunger tube inside is also a cylinder, and it goes all the way back into this space. The plunger comes all the way out. Now let me show you if I can get that out. I'm going to pause the video for a second here and then move on to the insides of this system. Okay, so we've opened that up. Now in here we have, again, metal catch plate. Because I've put a stronger spring load in here, I've put a stronger catch spring on it. But other than that, this is that catch spring is pretty standard. There are 1, 2, 3 screw posts holding this housing together. The plunger tube is the size of an expanded retaliator tube. It's a big chunky thing, and again, standard. Everyone should be familiar with what the plunger tube looks like by now if you're watching this channel. But yeah, because the internal diameter of a cedar spring is slightly smaller than the stock one, I have sanded this down slightly just so that this moves a little bit easier. But again, when it comes out of the box, it is not pitted and sanded in this way. It's absolutely gorgeous. Now the whole thing goes back like that. Now something I want to touch on, because I'm going to touch on it later with the Nexus Pro, I'm actually going to stand up so I can make sure I get this in frame. This piece here. So you've got a metal pin going all the way through the bolt sled, locking into this place here. So you can see how this whole spacing area moves the front of the breech forward, and you've got a very solid connection there with not just the metal pin but the plastic spacing all the way around it. And this is a solid, very solidly molded bolt sled. If I really wanted to put a super high spring load into this, I would look at replacing this with a metal bolt sled, but I am very happy with its current performance, so I don't feel that that's necessary currently. But yeah, so that's what the internals of the Dart Zone Pro look like. I'm going to put this all back together and then crack open the Nexus and see what we think. And this is what the Nexus Pro looks like when you open it up. Now this is a steel barrel, slightly wider. It's a 13mm in a diameter metal barrel as opposed to the 12.8mm of this one, which you get in the Dart Zone Pro. So it's a little bit more tolerant of dart fit. You have, because obviously it is a takedown feature, you have a single breech unit here. Barrel is mounted here. Comes all the way back here to a, again, very decently sized chunky plunger tube. I think they're the same size, close as I can evaluate. There might be very slight differences, but they're the same diameter and the same sort of length. So in terms of plunger volume, you're pretty much straightforward there. Now the catch plate in this one is plastic rather than metal. The plunger head is a solid plunger head as opposed to the vented plunger head that you got with the DZP. So there are a couple of very small cost cutting measures there. If you put a higher spring load in this, you're going to get potentially some flex on this, on your catch plate. The trigger well it's not quite identical, but it is near as damn it identical to the Dart Zone Pro. There's a lot of clear heritage here. This is the same piece. The trigger feels very similar. The safety is the same design. Not a huge amount to talk about there. We've got a D prime lock here, which is nice, which you don't have in the Dart Zone Pro. It's a nice little thing there, which is potentially because you don't have the takedown mechanism, it's a lot harder to sort of split this apart to clear a jam. This breech is held in place with a single Phillips head screw, which I'm going to take out because there is a part of this that I really do want to talk about, and that is the priming arm. Now, there's been a lot of talk in the community about this blaster and people putting like cedar springs or things like that in here, and the problem with that is, to my mind, going to be two parts. There are two positions here where we're going to get real issues when you put high powered springs into this. Part the first is here. So you still have that same square sort of spacing that you had with the plunger tube, but it is only holding it in one direction as opposed to holding it in two as you got with the bolt sled design. The other thing is this. There's a decent amount of flex in this plastic priming bar. Now they've tried to mitigate that with these runners in the shell, which are on both sides, and that should hopefully minimize that flex. But at the end of the day, this is a plastic part. It's an injection molded plastic part, and that is one of the ways in which you're going to see serious potential issues with longevity in high power spring loads. Now that is point the first, and point the second, as I said earlier, was the catch spring, which is also plastic. It's not the catch spring, sorry, the catch plate rather is plastic. So we've got two functionally load bearing parts made out of injection molding plastic as opposed to metal as they are in the DZP. Now there's been a lot of talk in the community of late with the Elite 2.0 line about cost-cutting measures, and it's clear that these are places where Primetime Toys have found ways to shave cents and dollars off this. At the end of the day, this blaster is a third of the price of the Dart Zone Pro. So there had to be corners cut somewhere, right? But the difference here is they haven't compromised the blaster. They haven't compromised your ability to open it up. They haven't compromised your ability to get in and repair it or make changes. They haven't compromised any of that kind of thing to make this a viable, moddable blaster. I mean, it is absolutely huge fun to work with. It's dead easy to put everything back together. He says as he does that now, why are you not clipping back together? There we go. And that all clips back together. All I need to do now is button it back up, put the spring back in, put the cap on the end. Make sure I put the right spring back in, that'll be a good start, Spectre, thank you. A little bit of B-roll here for you. This is the Dart Zone Pro spring with its locking end cap and the plunger tube guide rod thing. This is the Nexus Pro. Now, they're both, the springs are very, very similar. The Dart Zone Pro is ever so slightly, by like a millimeter or so, slightly thicker wiring. They both have 31 coils over the same spacing. So there's a slightly higher spring load here, but not by very much. I unfortunately don't have any way of actively comparing the kilogram weightings of these, but from purely like very unscientific testing, the Nexus Pro is a lighter spring, but not by very much. Like, if I wanted to get a Dart Zone Pro to drop its FPS, I'd stick an Nexus Pro spring in it and see what happened. I haven't done that test yet, and that's fine. Now, what I've done with my personal Dart Zone Pro is I've gone ahead and put this 12 kilogram cut down cedar spring in it to get it up to 200 or so. Currently averages around 205 with the Monkey Mods barrel that I've also put into it. But again, we're going to come on to that in the internal section of this video. So, final thoughts. I'm not going to lie, I'm conflicted. In its current form, this comes out of the box shooting 170, this comes out of the box shooting 150. If all you care about is out of the box performance, for sheer value for money, buy the Nexus Pro. If you want to get into the competitive hobby space, if you want to play super stock for sort of 150 FPS, 170 FPS, those kind of numbers, the Nexus Pro is more than good enough. Where the Dart Zone Pro shines is in its further upgradability. I have serious concerns about that priming arm, about this catch plate, about the overall robustness of the internals under high power spring loads. Now at 150 FPS, leave it stock spring in it, this is going to go all day long, and I have no qualms whatsoever about its reliability. But when we're talking about people putting like 16 kilogram cedar springs into it or things like that, I have a number of concerns about the long-term reliability of this blaster when put into a high power system. Not so the Dart Zone Pro. Aluminium priming arms, metal catch plate, the entire internal system is a just stronger design in terms of physical strength. From a reliability perspective, once you start getting into the 200 plus FPS range, the Dart Zone Pro is where you want to be. the question as to which one is better, the answer is depends what you want. I'm not going to say that the Nexus Pro is better. I'm not going to say that the Dart Zone Pro is better. And I bought a Dart Zone Pro Mark 1. I paid a decent chunk of money to own this. Not just purchasing it, but getting it shipped to the UK. And what I want, I'm not going to lie, what I wanted was to open both these up and go, this is just better, hands down, it's worth the money. It is worth the money for what I want it to do. I want to turn this into my Foam Pro Tour battle rifle. I wanted the ability to split it in half so I could carry it in a suitcase. I wanted it to feel reliable and robust in my hands as my Caliburn does. And it definitely does that. But for $50, for a super stock blaster that you can walk out of Walmart with and walk onto a field, and in something like Atomic Dart League or Foam Pro Tour where you're playing on a football pitch and the difference in range is this, everybody that has reviewed these blasters has said this, and I'm going to echo it. This is a game changer. The fact that this exists, the fact that iteratively we've gone from Dart Zone releasing this to kind of test the waters of the market to now to this, this is the future of the hobby. So yeah, which one do you buy? Depends what FPS you want and how much work you're willing to do to upgrade it. I've been Spectre N7. These have been the Dart Zone and Nexus Pros, but I should go.